At a small diner in Atlanta, Georgia, Anna, a black waitress, unexpectedly saves the life of James, a reclusive billionaire known across the city for his solitude and prejudices. That single act of kindness not only transforms their lives but also sends shockwaves through a world defined by barriers of class and race. As challenges from family, society, and even their own insecurities threaten their budding love, will they find the strength to overcome it all and prove that kindness and love can shatter every boundary? Join us on this deeply emotional and inspiring journey of Anna and James as they fight for love against all odds. Atlanta, Georgia. A cold winter night. The icy wind swept through the empty streets, carrying with it the familiar loneliness of a city late at night. Beneath the dim glow of the streetlights, Gracie's diner stood out like a lone beacon, a small pocket of life. Amid the biting chill inside, the diner was cozy and unpretentious. The sizzle of food on the griddle mixed with the faint strains of country music coming from an old radio perched on the counter. Truck drivers, laborers, and a few homeless patrons sat scattered across the booths, enjoying simple, hearty meals. At the far end of the counter, Anna, a young waitress, busied herself clearing tables. Her faded apron and worn-out shoes did little to diminish the quiet resilience in her demeanor. Anna, 24 years old, carried an unassuming yet quiet confidence, the kind forged through years of facing life's challenges head-on. She moved briskly through the diner, balancing trays, straightening chairs, or pushing through the kitchen door, but never seemed rushed. Her eyes held a steady focus, as though she saw something beyond what others could. A middle-aged truck driver, Dave, sitting in the corner booth, waved her down.
"Hey, Anna, more coffee over here."
Anna turned with a smile, filling a steaming mug before bringing it to him. Setting it down, she offered a gentle reminder.
"Drink it slow, okay? It's freezing outside, and you don't want to upset your stomach."
Dave chuckled, shaking his head.
"You always think ahead. Thanks, Anna."
At a nearby table, an elderly homeless man, Mr. Charlie, fidgeted nervously with a stack of old newspapers, his eyes darting around as though afraid of being noticed. Anna approached him quietly, carrying a small plate with a few slices of bread.
"I thought you might need a little extra tonight,"
she said softly, setting the plate down.
"It's a lot warmer in here than out there."
Mr. Charlie looked up, his weathered face breaking into a shy smile.
"Thank you, Anna. You're always so kind to me."
These small gestures were second nature to Anna, not because she sought recognition, but because she genuinely cared. She didn't see people as strangers, but as lives that needed a little light to make it through the day. Near the register, a young woman, Cindy, sat staring out the window, discreetly wiping away tears. Anna had noticed her demeanor the moment she walked in, but hadn't said anything. After delivering Cindy's order to her table, Anna returned with a warm glass of lemon water, not part of the order, and set it in front of her.
"This one's on the house,"
Anna said gently.
"You look like you might need it today."
Cindy glanced up, startled by the unexpected gesture. For a moment she said nothing, then let out a faint laugh, her voice still raw with emotion.
"Thank you. It's just been a bad day."
Anna smiled lightly.
"Every day feels bad when there's no one to share it with. Drink up. It'll help you feel a little better."
She didn't pry further, simply returned to her tasks. Yet from the small mirror near the register, Anna caught a glimpse of Cindy smiling faintly for the first time since she entered. The regulars at Gracie's diner all knew Anna well. Despite her own struggles, she always found ways to make the world around her a little gentler, even in the smallest of gestures. A kind word, a thoughtful act, or a free plate of bread for someone in need. These weren't grand gestures, but they carried profound meaning. Anna understood something many others overlooked sometimes. What people needed most wasn't food or money, but a sense of understanding, a bit of humanity. It was something she had longed for herself when her own family had faced hard times. And now, she was determined to give it to others in the way she wished someone had given it to her. The glass door of the diner jingled as it swung open. A gust of cold wind rushed in, carrying with it a man whose breath fogged the frosty air. James, 45, entered wearing a long black coat, a gray cashmere scarf wrapped neatly around his neck, and polished leather shoes that gleamed faintly under the diner's dim lighting. His tall frame seemed to occupy a corner of the room without effort. He wasn't overtly striking, but there was something about his presence that drew brief, curious glances from every patron. Not because of his tailored appearance, but because of an indescribable weight he seemed to carry, both detached and undeniably heavy. James walked to the counter, his eyes flicking briefly across the diner's unpretentious interior, the worn wooden tables, the crackling country music playing from an old radio, and the patrons enjoying simple, comforting meals. This world was entirely foreign to him, a far cry from the polished, opulent environment in which he had been raised. Born into a wealthy family in Connecticut, James grew up among aristocratic parties and exclusive gatherings of the elite. From a young age, he was taught that emotions were secondary and success was paramount. James's world operated under unspoken rules. The stronger dictated, the weaker complied. It was this upbringing that shaped him into one of the most formidable self-made billionaires in America. But his success came at the cost of profound loneliness. For years, James quietly accumulated wealth, attended discreet boardroom meetings, and mingled at perfunctory charity galas, but never once felt a genuine connection. That's why he had come to Gracie's diner tonight, to escape the pretense, to find a moment of stillness. James looked out of place, not intentionally, but intrinsically. His attire wasn't ostentatious, but the cashmere scarf and bespoke coat marked him as different nonetheless. From a nearby table, a truck driver by the window muttered to his friend,
"Bet he's lost or something."
James didn't react. He chose a table near the window, where the streetlight outside cast a faint glow across the scratched wooden surface. Since entering, he hadn't spoken a word. He didn't seem aloof, but he gave no indication of wanting to blend in, either. Sitting upright with perfect posture, James raised a hand to catch Anna's attention. His voice, deep and measured, carried effortlessly through the soft hum of the diner.
"Burger and black coffee. No sugar?"
Anna jotted the order into her notepad, casting him a brief, unreadable glance. But as she walked back to the counter, a thought flitted across her mind.
Sometimes the quietest people carry the biggest stories.
James kept his gaze fixed on the window. It wasn't clear if he was searching for something beyond the glass or trying to find answers within himself. Still, he was acutely aware of the occasional, probing stares from the other patrons in the diner. But he let them wonder. Not long after James began eating, the quiet ambience of the diner was shattered by a sudden, alarming sound. James slammed his coffee cup onto the table, clutching his throat with both hands. He coughed violently, gasping for air, but it seemed as though no oxygen was reaching his lungs. For a few moments, confusion paralyzed the patrons. James leaned forward, his eyes wide with panic as he reached for a nearby glass of water. His shaking hand knocked it over, sending it rolling off the table to shatter on the floor.
"What's wrong with him?"
A truck driver yelled from a corner booth.
"Oh God, does anyone know what to do?"
Another voice rang out. James's face reddened, the veins in his neck bulging as his gasps became weaker, his throat emitting a strangled wheeze. From behind the counter, Anna instantly recognized the signs of choking. Her sharp eyes flicked to James's desperate attempts to breathe. Without hesitation, she set down the tray she was holding and strode quickly toward him, her voice commanding and clear.
"Step back, let me through."
The patrons immediately parted, giving Anna space as she knelt beside James to assess the situation. He pointed feebly to his throat, a universal plea for help.
"It's okay. I'm here. Don't try to talk.
Anna said calmly, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. She stood and wrapped her arms around James's midsection, pulling him upright. Though small in stature, Anna moved with practiced precision. Sliding her fist beneath his ribcage, she placed her other hand over it and prepared to act. First thrust, Anna positioned her hands carefully and delivered a strong upward thrust. A muffled escaped James's lips, but the lodged piece of food didn't budge. His eyes widened further, and his trembling hands gestured weakly toward his throat. His body sagged slightly, his breaths now little more than faint, wheezing gasps.
It's going to be okay.
Anna reassured him, her tone resolute even as urgency gnawed at her nerves. Sweat began to bead on her forehead despite the cold air. Around her, the patrons stood frozen, their faces filled with worry and helplessness. Second thrust, gritting her teeth. Anna adjusted her grip and delivered another powerful thrust, this time with more force. James emitted a faint, guttural sound, but it was clear he was still choking. His knees buckled slightly, and his face began to turn a dangerous shade of blue. Anna's mind raced. She knew that without oxygen, brain damage could begin within seconds. Glancing quickly around, she realized she was on her own. Every pair of eyes in the room was focused on her, waiting for her to succeed. Final thrust.
Focus, Anna. This has to work,
she thought, her jaw tightening. Bracing herself, she delivered one last powerful thrust, pouring all her strength into the movement. James's body jerked forward violently, and with a sharp cough, the large piece of food shot out of his throat. It bounced onto the table before rolling off and hitting the floor with a dull thud. James collapsed back into his chair, his head drooping as his hands gripped his knees. He gasped loudly, each breath raspy but increasingly steady. The diner fell into complete silence. No one moved or spoke, as though the fragility of the moment demanded reverence. Only James's labored breaths filled the air. Then, breaking the stillness, a voice shouted.
She did it. She saved him.
Murmurs rippled through the room.
I thought he was a goner. I've never seen someone react so fast.
Anna straightened, releasing James and stepping back. She closed her eyes for a moment, exhaling deeply to release the tension that had coiled in her chest. When she opened them again, she saw James struggling to lift his head, his face pale but his eyes gradually regaining focus. James slowly lifted his head, his eyes meeting Anna's for the first time, not as a customer and waitress, but as two people who had shared a moment on the edge of life and death. His eyes, red from the lack of oxygen, carried a deep gratitude mixed with astonishment. He had never imagined that his survival would rest in the hands of a young woman who had quietly served him coffee just moments ago. Anna leaned closer, placing one hand lightly on the edge of the table to steady herself. Her breathing was still uneven from the effort of saving him, and beads of sweat shimmered under the neon light. Yet her gaze remained calm and precise, as though everything had unfolded exactly as she'd planned. James struggled to speak, his voice hoarse and fragmented.
Thank you.
Anna frowned slightly, not from surprise, but as if she were still evaluating his condition. She stepped back a bit, but kept her tone steady and firm.
You're okay now. Just rest for a moment. Don't try to move yet. Your breathing will stabilize soon.
James watched her every move, his gaze lingering on the poise and competence she exuded. In a setting as unremarkable as this small diner, her actions stood out starkly. He couldn't reconcile her decisive calmness in the crisis with the modest role she seemed to play here. He tried to speak again, but his voice caught in his throat. Sensing his effort, Anna softened her voice.
There's no need to thank me. I only did what needed to be done.
Straightening, she adjusted her faded apron and let a faint smile flicker across her lips before it disappeared just as quickly. To her, saving James wasn't extraordinary, it was instinct, honed from something deep within her. Something in her demeanor hinted at training or experiences beyond the ordinary life of a diner waitress.
Next time, chew slower.
Anna quipped lightly, her tone warm but firm.
Life's worth more than one meal.
James chuckled weakly, a sound more gratitude than humor. His eyes betrayed a curiosity he couldn't quite place. He wanted to ask more about her, about how she'd learned to act so decisively. But before he could form the words, Anna had turned and walked back to her duties with quiet efficiency, resuming her work as though nothing had happened. James remained seated, his breathing still uneven as he processed what had just occurred. A strange feeling welled within him, not merely relief at having survived, but a mixture of awe and intrigue. He couldn't shake the image of Anna from his mind, her petite frame, her firm yet compassionate grip, and her steady gaze during the crisis. She was unlike anyone he had ever encountered. James had spent years in circles of polished professionals and sharp-tongued executives, yet none of them had ever demonstrated the kind of calm courage Anna had shown tonight. He closed his eyes briefly, replaying the moment she had taken charge, her voice commanding yet steady, and her focused, decisive movements reminded him of a professional in a high-stakes situation, more like a doctor than a diner waitress.
How does someone like her end up here?
James wondered.
What's her story?
As Anna returned to the counter, seamlessly blending back into her routine, James continued to observe her quietly. She displayed no pride in her actions, no need for recognition or validation. To her, it seemed, saving him was just another part of her day. When James finally stood to leave, his steps were slower than usual. He paused at the door, casting one last glance at Anna through the fogged glass.
Is she just a waitress, or is she hiding something bigger beneath the surface?
A thought struck him with unexpected clarity.
Tonight I didn't just survive. I met someone extraordinary.
The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of James's expansive office. The room was lined with polished desks and walls adorned with framed accolades. His inbox was full of emails and proposals, his schedule packed with meetings and deadlines. But James's thoughts weren't on his work. Instead, they kept drifting back to Gracie's diner and to Anna. Her unassuming presence, her precise actions, and her composed demeanor lingered in his mind like a puzzle he felt compelled to solve. He couldn't ignore the sense that she carried untold stories, ones that didn't belong in a simple diner. Unable to focus, James made a decision. He would return to Gracie's diner not just to express his gratitude properly, but to learn more about the woman who had saved his life and left an indelible impression on his soul. Chapter 2: Gratitude and Curiosity. 3 days after the incident at the diner, James sat in his high-rise office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling glass windows that offered a panoramic view of Atlanta. Daylight poured in, reflecting off the screens filled with numbers and graphs. But his gaze was fixed straight ahead, unfocused. The image of Anna, her steady hands, her calm eyes kept replaying in his mind. The feeling of gratitude lingered, but what troubled him more was curiosity. James had faced countless life or death situations in business, but none of them felt like this. He had always believed that everything could be bought with money, loyalty, help, even gratitude. But Anna had made him question that belief.
A waitress in a small diner, acting with the precision of an experienced doctor? Who is she? And why is she here, working a job like this?
James glanced at a meeting scheduled on his calendar. He closed his laptop and decided to leave the office earlier than usual. For the first time in years, he felt compelled to find answers to something beyond his control. The glass door chimed softly as James stepped into the diner once more. Unlike his last visit, this time he entered with a different mindset, not as a patron seeking solitude, but as a man searching for answers. Everything in the diner seemed unchanged: the worn wooden tables, the faint sound of country music from the radio, and the warm aroma of food that filled the air. James chose the same table by the window as before. He sat down, his hand brushing lightly over the edge of the table, touching the spot where fate had almost cut his life short. The familiarity of it weighed heavily on him. When Anna approached, her movements were as quick and focused as ever. James watched her, offering a small, genuine smile a rarity for him.
"I didn't think I'd be back here so soon,"
he began.
"but I think I owe you a proper thank you."
Anna set down her tray, nodding slightly. She didn't seem surprised to see him, as though saving his life was just another part of her daily routine.
"I think you already thanked me,"
she replied.
"There's no need to say it again."
James chuckled softly, but his eyes stayed fixed on her. He sensed that her words weren't just polite deflection, they were the words of someone who refused to turn an act of kindness into a debt. Quietly, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a check, and filled in a generous amount before placing it on the table in front of her.
"Consider this a gift,"
he said,
"to thank you for saving my life. Use it for whatever you need."
The space around them seemed to still. The background noise of clinking plates and casual conversation faded, eclipsed by the quiet tension between the two of them. Anna glanced at the check, showing neither surprise nor discomfort. Her calm gaze met James's, steady and resolute.
"I didn't do it for money,"
she said firmly.
"and I don't need this gift. If you really want to thank me, use that money to help someone else who needs it more."
James froze for a moment. For the first time in his life, someone was refusing his money not out of pride or hesitation, but because they genuinely didn't want it. He opened his mouth to respond, but Anna spoke first, her tone softening yet retaining its strength.
"You have power, you have money. If you really want to make a difference, use what you have to change someone else's life, not mine."
James stared at Anna, feeling as though she had upended everything he thought he understood about gratitude. Her words weren't harsh, but they struck a chord deep within him, a part of himself he rarely touched.
"Someone else who needs it more,"
he repeated, almost as if asking himself the question. Anna offered a faint smile, picking up her tray again.
"That's right. Someone like you could do far more than write a check."
James leaned back in his chair, his eyes following Anna as she walked away. Her words left him unsettled, yet they also sparked something unfamiliar. For the first time, James felt there was something his wealth couldn't buy: trust and authenticity. As Anna returned to the counter and resumed her work, James remained seated at the table, staring at the check. He picked it up, folded it carefully, and slipped it back into his pocket. One thought echoed in his mind, clearer than ever.
Who is she, and why is she so different?
James no longer saw Anna as just a waitress. He began observing her with relentless curiosity, as if she were a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Every little action of hers carried a unique quality that James had never encountered in anyone else. One evening, the diner was busier than usual. A middle-aged man scowled and raised his voice when his food was delayed.
What's taking so long? People come here to eat, not to wait.
James instinctively glanced toward the counter, wondering how the young waitress would respond. But instead of snapping back or attempting to explain, Anna simply bowed her head slightly and replied calmly.
I'm very sorry for the wait, sir. Let me bring you an extra cup of coffee on the house to make up for the delay.
James noticed that her response wasn't mechanical politeness but genuine sincerity. She wasn't trying to appease the man out of fear, but chose to preserve a sense of harmony for the entire diner. One afternoon, Mr. Charlie, a homeless man, walked into the diner, his demeanor uneasy. He removed an old knit cap, his eyes darting around nervously before he timidly sat at a table. Anna approached with a gentle smile. Before he could order, he pulled out a few crumpled coins from his pocket.
Can I get the cheapest meal you have?
He asked hesitantly. Anna looked at him with eyes free of judgment. Smiling softly, she replied,
It's all right, Mr. Charlie. This one's on us. But next time, make sure to let me know ahead of time, okay?
James couldn't look away from the scene. He realized Anna wasn't just a waitress, she had the remarkable ability to see the humanity in everyone around her and respond with natural kindness. One late night, a group of rowdy young men stumbled into the diner. One of them, drunk and obnoxious, made a crude comment directed at Anna.
"Hey, sweetheart, bring us more beer. Don't give me that icy look. It doesn't suit you."
James felt his blood boil, but he chose to stay seated, curious to see how Anna would handle the situation. She looked the man straight in the eye, her gaze calm and unwavering, like a still lake.
"I'm sorry, sir, but we don't serve alcohol. If you'd like a soda, I'll bring it right away."
When her response was met with mocking laughter, she didn't lose her composure. She turned, fetched a glass of iced water, and placed it on their table without another word. James recognized that this wasn't weakness, it was a different kind of strength, the ability to stay composed in the face of disrespect, protecting both herself and the space around her. One quiet evening, the diner was unusually empty. James sat at his usual table, sipping black coffee. As he glanced around, his eyes landed on a corner where Anna sat after her shift. In front of her was not a phone or a casual magazine, but an old medical textbook with a worn cover. Anna carefully turned each page, occasionally jotting notes on small slips of paper or highlighting passages. James felt drawn to her. In that moment, she wasn't just the waitress he had come to know, she belonged to a different world, one that she had somehow left behind. He stood, hesitating briefly, before walking toward her. Curiosity got the better of him.
"What are you reading?"
he asked. Anna looked up, slightly surprised to see James, but she didn't seem flustered. She gently closed the book and set it aside with care, as if protecting a precious memory.
"Just an old book,"
she replied. James raised an eyebrow, dissatisfied with the vague answer. He pulled out a nearby chair and sat down, his eyes filled with curiosity.
"Did you study medicine?"
Anna smiled faintly, but it wasn't a happy smile. It carried traces of nostalgia and an unmistakable sadness.
"I once dreamed of becoming a doctor,"
she admitted.
But that was a lifetime ago."
James leaned forward, unsettled by her words.
"A lifetime ago? Why give it up? I can't imagine anyone willingly walking away from a dream like that."
Her gaze softened, but her voice remained calm and steady.
"Sometimes circumstances don't allow us to hold on to our dreams. I've learned to accept that. But reading these books reminds me that the dream once existed."
Her words left James silent. Not because she was wrong, but because he could feel the pain she had worked so hard to conceal. James studied her and, for a fleeting moment, was pulled back to his own youth, a time when he, too, had dreams far greater than himself, before responsibility and wealth had clouded them. This young woman hadn't merely abandoned her dream. She had traded it away to preserve her dignity. And for the first time in years, James felt a familiar yet distant emotion: admiration. When James left the diner that night, his mind was filled with chaotic thoughts. The conversation with Anna about the medical textbook and her unfulfilled dream had left a deep impression on him. For the first time in years, James found himself captivated not by numbers or business deals, but by a person who seemed to carry hidden sorrows that he could not reach. In the days that followed, James realized he had developed a new habit, returning to Gracie's diner more often, not just for the coffee but to observe and converse with Anna. However, Anna kept her distance. Though open during their conversations, she did not let James delve deeper into her life. This did not discourage James, it only made him more curious. He wanted to understand what had shaped her into the strong yet quietly reflective person she was. The night was late, and the freezing wind swept through the deserted streets of Atlanta. Gracie's diner had just closed, and Anna pulled a thin scarf around her neck, walking briskly toward her old car. The aging sedan had been her companion for years, clunky, outdated, but an indispensable part of her life. She opened the door, slid into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The engine groaned heavily, but then fell silent. Anna frowned and tried again, but the result was the same. With a resigned sigh, she leaned back against the seat. A long day of dealing with demanding customers and endless tasks had now culminated in an unexpected setback. Anna pulled out her phone, opened her rideshare app, and waited. Minutes passed, and the screen flashed an error message: no available drivers. Across the parking lot, James stepped out of the diner. He paused for a moment, his eyes settling on Anna and her car. He saw her fiddling with something, her head bowed as if weighing her options. James stood at a distance, leaning casually against his own car, observing Anna's quiet struggle. The stillness of the late-night atmosphere was broken only by the repeated sounds of her car's engine trying and failing to start. The dim streetlights cast a soft glow over Anna's hair, highlighting the weariness in her movements, yet also revealing an unyielding determination. James wasn't the type to interfere in other people's affairs. In his world, most individuals manage their own problems. But tonight, watching Anna, a slender, young woman standing alone in the freezing Atlanta night, he felt an unfamiliar pull.
How long has she been taking care of herself?
He wondered.
She's refused help before, even when I wanted to repay her. Would she accept an outstretched hand now?
He frowned and exhaled lightly, as if wrestling with his own thoughts. Deep down, he knew this wasn't his responsibility, but something stronger than logic drove him forward. Finally, James tucked his hands into his coat pockets and walked slowly toward Anna. He hesitated for a moment upon reaching her, as if deliberating on how to begin. But when he caught the faint look of frustration on her face, he didn't hold back any longer.
Having trouble with your car?
James's deep, clear voice broke through the quiet, startling Anna. She looked up, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of him. Under the streetlight, James's tall frame and thick coat stood out starkly against the humble surroundings.
You?
Anna said, raising an eyebrow, her surprise evident. James nodded, his gaze steady and filled with concern.
You look like you're struggling. Won't start?
Anna hesitated. She was used to handling things on her own. The idea of accepting help, especially from someone like James, didn't come easily.
I think the battery's dead,
she admitted, her voice tinged with a faint chuckle of resignation.
I've been trying to call a ride, but nothing's coming through.
James glanced around the empty parking lot, noting its desolate quietness. He could sense her isolation in that moment. For someone like Anna, independence might be her shield, but it could also be a burden she bore alone.
It's late,
James said after a pause, his tone measured.
And I doubt you'll find help quickly.
He stopped briefly, as if weighing his words, before adding,
Let me give you a ride. I'm heading in the same direction anyway.
Anna looked at James, her expression flickering with hesitation. Pride urged her to refuse, just as she had countless times before when offered help. But she also knew she didn't have many options tonight. James's eyes stopped her from immediately declining. There was no condescension in his gaze, no implication that he thought she couldn't handle herself. Instead, there was genuine sincerity, something she didn't expect from a man like him.
All right,
Anna said finally, offering a faint smile to break the tension.
But just this once.
James gave a small nod, the corners of his lips curving upward in an understated smile. He opened the car door for her, a gesture he hadn't thought necessary in years but found oddly meaningful now. As James settled into the driver's seat, he felt an unusual shift within himself. He didn't understand why something as simple as offering a ride felt so significant. Perhaps it was because this wasn't just a ride. It was an opportunity to understand someone who had disrupted his carefully controlled world, a woman who had shown him that not everything could be solved with money or power. Glancing at Anna, who sat quietly in the passenger seat with her gaze fixed out the window, James felt an unexpected sense of connection. This moment, though seemingly ordinary, marked the beginning of something neither of them could foresee. The car rolled slowly through the deserted streets, the glow of streetlights streaming through the windows like soft golden ribbons. James sat quietly behind the wheel, his eyes focused on the road, though he occasionally glanced at Anna. Anna leaned back against her seat, her hands clasped in her lap. Her gaze was fixed on the window, but her expression seemed distant, as though she were lost in memories far away. The warmth from the car's heater created a cocoon of comfort, but the silence between them carried an unusual weight. After a few moments of quiet, James decided to break the silence.
"Do you live far from the diner?"
he asked. Anna turned her head, slightly surprised by the simplicity and sincerity of the question.
"Not too far. About a 15-minute drive,"
she replied.
I live with my mom and younger brother."
Her voice was soft but carried an undertone of weariness, as though those words encapsulated years of responsibility resting heavily on her shoulders. James considered her answer for a moment. He understood the weight of the word family in her response. It wasn't just a statement, it was a summary of sacrifices.
"How's your mother doing?"
he asked gently. Anna hesitated briefly, and the faint smile on her lips faded.
"Better than before, but she can't do heavy work anymore. My brother's still in high school. Both of us, my mom and I, do what we can to make sure he has a better future."
James remained silent, sensing the depth of her sacrifice in her words. He couldn't grasp it fully but felt compelled to know more. After a pause, he carefully asked, his tone almost cautious, as if afraid of stirring something fragile within her.
"You mentioned wanting to be a doctor. What made you give up that dream?"
The question made Anna lean back into her seat, her gaze drifting to the passing lights outside. A faint smile crossed her lips, but it wasn't a happy one. It was the smile of someone looking back on a dream now out of reach.
"When I was younger, I always dreamed of becoming a doctor. I wanted to help the poor in my community because I know what it feels like to go without care."
She began, her voice steady but tinged with quiet emotion. She paused, drawing in a deep breath, as if preparing herself for the rest.
"But when my mom got sick, I couldn't continue studying. Med school tuition was unimaginable for us, and I knew my brother needed someone at home to support him. So I chose to leave that dream behind and start working."
Her tone was gentle, devoid of bitterness, but it carried an ache that couldn't be disguised.
"Some dreams aren't meant for everyone,"
she added with a soft shrug.
"I've learned to accept that."
James felt a lump rise in his throat. Beneath Anna's calm demeanor and quiet smile, he now saw years of silent sacrifice and a life molded by choices she hadn't wanted to make but had felt she had to. The atmosphere in the car grew heavier for a moment, but James wouldn't let the silence linger. He offered a small, thoughtful smile, not to dispel the gravity of the conversation, but to share something of his own.
"You're not the only one,"
he said gently.
"I had a dream that didn't work out too."
Anna turned to him, surprise evident in her expression.
"You? Someone like you had an unfulfilled dream?"
James nodded, his eyes still focused on the road. When he spoke, his voice was unhurried, as though recounting something he hadn't shared in years.
"When I was young, I wanted to be an artist, a painter. I thought I could spend my life with brushes and canvases, but my family had other expectations. They needed someone to carry on the legacy, someone to shoulder the business. I haven't picked up a brush in years because I convinced myself that someone like me doesn't get to dream."
James's words were more than a confession, they were an acknowledgement. He didn't try to justify himself, but also couldn't deny how responsibility had stolen a part of who he once was. Anna remained silent for a few seconds, her gaze softening. For the first time, she saw the man beside her not merely as a billionaire with a stoic exterior, but as someone who had fought and sacrificed, just like her. She smiled faintly, a smile no longer tinged with sadness but with understanding.
Maybe neither of us has completely accepted that dreams can still hold value?
James glanced at her momentarily. His eyes held a rare mix of respect and empathy, a sentiment he seldom extended to anyone.
You think so? Perhaps you're right.
The car continued its journey, but this silence was no longer cold. Both sank into their own thoughts, yet there was an unspoken connection between them, a thread woven from unfulfilled dreams and the pain of sacrifice. When the car stopped outside Anna's house, she turned to James, her expression softening as a gentle smile curved her lips.
Thank you for driving me home. Maybe tonight, I've learned to trust a little more.
James smiled faintly in return, but an indescribable feeling stirred within him. This young woman didn't just pique his curiosity, she made him see things he had never paid attention to before: simplicity, sacrifice, and the meaning behind dreams left behind.
Sometimes, trusting the right person can create miracles,
he replied, his eyes reflecting a sincerity that surprised even himself. As Anna stepped inside her house, James watched her figure disappear behind the door. He realized that their conversation hadn't been just idle talk. It had touched a deeply buried part of him, a part he had concealed beneath layers of success and power.
How many people out there are just like her, trading their dreams for the sake of others?
The question echoed in his mind as he drove home. But life rarely stays still for long. In the days that followed, James continued to visit Gracie's diner, not necessarily to talk, but to observe from a distance. Each time he watched Anna at work, he felt an increasing admiration for the quiet strength and compassion that radiated from her. Until one night, everything changed. James entered the diner as usual, but the atmosphere was charged with an unusual tension. A group of intoxicated customers at the corner table had grown louder and rowdier. The air felt heavy, and the chatter of the other patrons had dulled into uneasy murmurs. The situation escalated when Anna approached the unruly table, as she always did, with calmness and grace. But this time, the insults and harassment directed at her crossed a line. From his seat in the corner, James watched, his fists tightening. He had always respected her ability to handle difficult situations with dignity. Yet tonight, something inside him snapped. He knew this was the moment when he could no longer remain an observer. That night, Gracie's diner was shrouded in a somber atmosphere. The steady drizzle outside fogged up the glass doors, and inside, a few scattered patrons quietly sipped their coffee or late-night meals, speaking in hushed tones. The usual calm of the late-night diner felt even more subdued, an uneasy stillness before a storm. The door burst open abruptly, letting in a rush of cold wind and loud laughter. 3 drunk men stumbled in, the stench of alcohol wafting off them before they even sat down. Everyone in the diner, including Anna, instinctively looked up. No one said a word, but the atmosphere shifted immediately. The other patrons lowered their heads, avoiding eye contact with the trio. Anna, however, remained calm, gripping the tray against her chest as if reminding herself to stay composed. The 3 men chose a table in the center of the diner, their heavy bodies making the chairs creak as they sat. One of them, a bearded man who appeared to be the ringleader, pulled a small bottle of liquor from his pocket and took a long swig without bothering to hide it.
Let's see. So this is supposed to be the warmest place in the neighborhood, huh?
He rasped with a crooked grin. The second man, thin with bloodshot eyes, snorted derisively.
Nothing special, but maybe the service here is worth checking out.
His gaze settled on Anna, and a twisted smile spread across his face. He drummed his fingers on the table and called out loudly.
Hey, you brown-skinned sweetheart over there, come here.
Anna took a deep breath, keeping her voice steady, and walked over with her small notepad in hand. She could feel the eyes of all 3 men scrutinizing every step she took.
Good evening. How can I help you?
She asked, her tone even and devoid of emotion. The bearded man looked up, his eyes scanning Anna from head to toe with brazen disrespect.
Well, look at this. A little brown girl here to serve us, huh?
His words weren't just mocking, they carried an overt tone of insult. Anna remained composed, nodding toward the menu.
We have menus on the table. If you'd like to order, let me know.
But instead of looking at the menu, the thin man let out a loud, mocking laugh.
Oh, I think she doesn't like talking to guys like us. What, are we not good enough for her?
Their laughter echoed through the diner, making the already tense air even heavier. Anna could sense the worried glances of a few other patrons.
If you're not ready to order, I'll come back later,
she said calmly, turning to leave. But just as she did, the third man, the largest of the three, with arms covered in tattoos, stood up and blocked her path. The big man moved close to Anna, the stench of alcohol making her stomach churn. He stared straight into her eyes with a menacing smile.
You think you're too good for us, huh? Can't even be polite.
Anna met his gaze without flinching. Her voice was steady as she said,
Please respect my space.
Her words made the tattooed man smirk, but his smile quickly turned to anger. He reached out and grabbed her wrist in a tight grip.
I just want to talk, sweetheart,
he said, his voice slurred and sleazy. Anna felt the pain of his grip, but she refused to let fear take control. With a sharp tug, she pulled her hand free and stepped back. Her voice was firm.
Don't touch me.
The big man laughed loudly, but there was no amusement in it.
Oh, so you like to act tough? Let's see how long you can keep it up.
He took another step toward Anna, his fists clenched. The bearded man and the thin man at the table also stood up, surrounding her, making the air in the diner feel even more suffocating. Anna didn't back down. Though her heart pounded in her chest and her fingers gripped the tray so tightly that her knuckles turned white, her gaze burned steady, like a flame. She knew fear would only embolden them, and the last thing she wanted was to let fear dictate the situation. The tattooed man, towering over her, leaned in close.
Who do you think you are? Standing there all tough, but think about it. Who's going to save you in this cheap little diner?
His words were like a blade, but Anna refused to let them cut too deeply. She took a deep breath and adjusted her voice to ensure it didn't waver.
I don't need anyone to save me, but you will leave this diner now.
The words weren't loud, but they carried the weight of iron. She deliberately held her gaze on the tattooed man, refusing to flinch, even as he loomed just a step away. The thin man behind her let out a piercing laugh, his voice grating against the tense silence in the diner.
She thinks she's some kind of hero, huh? No, sweetheart, you're just a waitress. You should know your place.
The bearded man took another swig from his bottle and slammed it onto the table, making it rattle. He leaned forward, his tone mocking.
Come on, girl. We're just trying to have a little fun. No need to make this a big deal.
Each word, each glance from them felt like a dagger, but Anna refused to let herself be shaken. She took another deep breath, feeling every beat of her heart pounding in her chest. Though her legs felt slightly unsteady, they remained planted firmly where she stood.
I'll say it one last time. If you don't leave, I'll call the police.
Her voice didn't falter, and that caused the group to hesitate for a moment. But instead of retreating, the tattooed man stepped closer. His large hand reached for the tray in her grip, not to harm her this time, but as a show of dominance.
The police, huh? You think they'll rush to save a brown-skinned waitress in a little diner like this? Come on, don't be so uptight.
Anna didn't step back but tightened her grip on the tray. She held it so firmly that her nails dug into the edges, and her gaze bore into his.
I'm not afraid of you, and you won't get the chance to hurt me or anyone else in this diner.
Her words, sharp as knives, made the room go silent. The tattooed man hesitated not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. It sounded like a command, not a plea. The bearded man broke the silence with a loud laugh, shattering the tension.
Oh, this one's feisty. I think we should teach her a little lesson, just for fun.
He stood up, the wooden chair creaking under his weight. The tattooed man yanked the tray from Anna's hands, sending it clattering to the floor with a sharp crash. The entire diner seemed to hold its breath. A few patrons exchanged nervous glances but didn't dare move. Anna looked down at the fallen tray, then back up, her eyes unchanging.
Your actions don't scare me, but if you don't leave, you'll regret it.
Her voice was lower now, slower and brimming with strength. For a fleeting moment, the tattooed man stared at her, as if he couldn't believe that a small woman like her could hold her ground against his intimidation. James sat in the corner of the diner, his eyes narrowing as the situation escalated. He had been watching the group of men since they walked in, noting every word and movement with careful precision. At first, James intended to keep his distance. While he didn't condone the disrespect directed at Anna, most of his life had been built on the principle.
Don't interfere in things that aren't your business.
But tonight, something was different. Everything changed when the tattooed man yanked Anna's hand. James's body tensed instinctively, and he felt a surge of anger that he rarely allowed to surface. Seeing Anna pull away, her gaze resolute but tinged with solitude, struck James with an almost physical force, like a vice squeezing his chest. He knew that if he didn't act, she would have to face them alone. And he couldn't let that happen. He set his coffee cup down with a deliberate clink, the sound breaking through the oppressive silence. Rising to his feet, he adjusted his coat collar and strode toward the group with a purposeful gait, his expression turning steely. A smoldering anger burned inside him, not just for the injustice of the moment, but because this felt personal. James didn't just see a group of drunken men threatening a woman. He saw someone who had saved his life, a person he respected being placed in danger before his eyes. Memories of his younger days flashed through his mind. His father had insisted he learn karate as a boy, not to become the strongest, but to defend himself and others. James hadn't used those skills in decades, but now his body seemed to act on muscle memory alone. Standing tall, he stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere like a blade.
Stop!
The tattooed man turned, his gaze sweeping over James with blatant disdain.
Who do you think you are, old man?
James didn't reply immediately. Instead, he placed himself squarely between Anna and the group of men, his cold stare fixed on the leader.
I'm the man who doesn't let things like this happen. Leave now.
His voice wasn't loud, but the underlying authority in it brought the entire diner to a standstill. The tattooed man looked to his companions, then laughed mockingly.
Listen here, buddy. You better get back to your little corner before you get yourself into trouble.
James didn't flinch. He kept his gaze locked on the man and stepped closer.
I said, get out!
The oppressive atmosphere burst when the tattooed man swung a punch at James. James sidestepped with surprising agility, his reflexes belying his age. His right hand shot up, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it sharply. The man let out a grunt of pain, but James didn't stop there. He drove his left elbow into the man's chest, forcing him to stumble back, clutching his ribs. The second man, the thin one, charged from the side, but James spun and delivered a swift kick to his knee. The man crumpled to the floor, crying out in agony. The bearded man grabbed a liquor bottle and lunged toward James, intending to smash it over his head. James caught his wrist mid-swing, twisting it until the bottle clattered to the ground and shattered. With a powerful shove, he sent the man sprawling onto a table, scattering plates and cups. The tattooed man, clutching his chest, staggered to his feet and charged again. This time, James was ready. He delivered a sharp kick to the man's stomach, doubling him over and leaving him gasping for air. James stepped back, his hands still raised in a defensive stance, but none of the men made another move. All three were battered and panting, their eyes betraying fear as they realized they were outmatched.
Damn it, let's get out of here!
The bearded man snarled, grabbing his companions and dragging them toward the exit. Their curses faded as the door swung shut behind them, leaving the diner in a heavy silence. James exhaled slowly, rolling his left shoulder to ease the ache it had begun to set in. He scanned the room, his gaze landing on Anna, who stood frozen with wide eyes, a look of disbelief etched on her face. Anna stood still for a few moments after the group of men left, the diner gradually returning to its usual quiet. But inside her, everything was still churning. She looked at James, the man who had just stood in front of her like a living shield. His coat was disheveled, his breathing labored, and a faint red mark was visible on his left shoulder. A wave of emotion surged through her, gratitude mixed with worry. James had risked himself for her, and she feared the price he might have paid. She quickly moved toward him, gently placing a hand on his arm. Her voice trembled slightly.
"You hurt?"
James was taken aback by her sudden concern but smiled, shrugging as though it were nothing.
"It's fine. Just a minor ache. I've had worse."
Anna didn't accept his dismissal. She shook her head lightly and tugged at his coat, pulling it down to reveal the red and swollen area on his shoulder. The tension in her expression shifted to genuine worry.
"Sit down,"
she said, her voice firm yet tinged with concern. James didn't argue, allowing Anna to guide him to the counter. She retrieved an old first aid kit from a drawer, placing it on the table with swift but gentle movements. As Anna opened the first aid kit, James quietly observed her. He noticed her small hands, steady and sure. Her eyes, usually calm and composed, now shone with a care she was trying to mask.
"This might sting a little,"
Anna said as she dabbed alcohol-soaked cotton on his wound. James winced slightly at the sharp pain but didn't complain. Instead, he offered a faint smile, his voice carrying a hint of humor to lighten the tension.
"You seem skilled. I think I've just found my personal doctor."
Her hand paused briefly, but then she shook her head and gave a soft chuckle.
"I used to want to be a doctor, but that dream is long gone."
She bent down to continue dressing the wound, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper.
"Besides, you didn't have to do that. They could have hurt you much worse."
James was silent for a moment, his gaze steady and sincere. He replied slowly, as if weighing each word.
"I couldn't just stand by and watch them hurt you."
The simple statement carried the weight of genuine concern. Anna's hands faltered slightly but resumed their task quickly. She kept her head lowered, masking the fleeting emotion in her eyes, though James could sense it.
"I've grown used to handling things on my own,"
Anna said softly, tightening the gauze around his shoulder.
"But not everyone would step in like you did."
For the first time in years, Anna felt what it was like to be genuinely protected. Not out of pity, not because someone thought she was weak, but because someone truly cared. James smiled gently.
"You don't have to do everything alone. Sometimes having someone to lean on isn't such a bad thing."
Anna looked up at him, her eyes softening. In that moment, she no longer saw him as a wealthy patron or a man who often watched her from the corner of the diner. She saw someone willing to put himself at risk for her, someone she could trust. James met her gaze, and in his eyes there was no longer the initial curiosity. Instead, there was respect, understanding, and a sense of connection he hadn't experienced before.
"Thank you,"
Anna said quietly, her voice low and more sincere than it had ever been. James nodded, his smile one of quiet satisfaction. It wasn't just about having done the right thing for her, it was about doing something that felt right for himself too. In that moment, without needing more words, both of them understood that their relationship had crossed beyond the boundaries of mere acquaintance. A strong bond had been formed not just from gratitude but from mutual trust and deep empathy. As Anna carefully placed the first aid kit back on the counter, she silently glanced at James. Her eyes were full of gratitude but also tinged with reflection. His words echoed in her mind.
"I couldn't just stand by and watch them hurt you."
James straightened up, lightly adjusting his coat. even though his left shoulder still ached. He looked at Anna again, this time with a gentle smile, not one meant to reassure, but one of genuine sincerity.
You don't need to thank me. Sometimes, doing the right thing is also a way of protecting yourself.
His words made Anna smile faintly, though that smile held more than just gratitude. Perhaps, for the first time in years, she felt the presence of someone who truly stood beside her. In the days that followed, James continued to visit the diner more frequently. But this time, the invisible distance between him and Anna had disappeared. They began to share more, not just small talk about everyday life, but also deeper concerns that neither of them easily opened up about to others. One quiet weekend morning, when Gracie's diner was less crowded than usual, Anna invited James to a special place.
If you want to understand why I do what I do, come with me on Sunday morning.
James, who rarely spent his free time on anything outside of work, agreed immediately. Not out of curiosity, but because he wanted to learn more about Anna's world, a world she placed above herself. A small church came into view as James's car turned onto a quiet street. Its red brick walls were covered in moss, the roof weathered but still standing strong against time. A large oak tree cast its shade nearby, its branches swaying gently in the breeze, as if welcoming anyone who approached. James stepped out of his car and quietly took in the scene. He rarely visited places like this. To him, churches had long been distant symbols of a faith that didn't align with his practical worldview. But today, the feeling was different. As he stepped through the wide wooden doors, James was immediately struck by the warmth inside. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows above, casting vibrant colors onto the worn gray tiles below. The space was modest, not grand, but alive with the laughter of children and the soft voices of nuns bustling about with their tasks. The moment Anna entered the church, she seemed transformed, completely at ease and radiant. The children's laughter echoed throughout the space, and in an instant, a little girl, about 6 years old with wild curls, darted toward Anna, her face lighting up.
Auntie Anna! Auntie Anna, I have something for you today.
The girl wore a faded floral dress, but in her hands, she carried a drawing like a treasure. It was a page torn from an old notebook, colored with cheap crayons. Anna crouched down, carefully lifting the little girl into her arms. Her eyes glowed with a gentle warmth that seemed to brighten the entire room.
Oh, you finished it already? Let me see.
She took the drawing from the child's small hands and studied it. Though the lines were wobbly, the image of two people holding hands under a starry sky was clear.
This is me, isn't it?
Anna asked, pointing to the larger figure in the picture. The girl nodded enthusiastically, her smile wide.
Yes, that's you, and that's me. You said you'd always be here with me?
James stood near the door, watching in silence. He couldn't help but marvel at how the children flocked to Anna, as if she were a beacon of light in their difficult world. Anna smiled, gently brushing the girl's hair back before speaking softly.
This is beautiful, sweetheart. You did a wonderful job, but I think we could add a little green for the grass and trees here. What do you think?
The girl's eyes widened, as if Anna had just shared the most brilliant idea, and she hugged the drawing tightly before running off, her laughter echoing. Anna stood up, smoothing her dress, and turned to face James, who was still standing and observing her. She caught his gaze filled with a mix of surprise and unspoken admiration.
These children are very special,
she said softly, her lips curling into a tender smile.
They seem to adore you,
James replied, his eyes following the children darting around the room. Anna stepped closer to James, her voice steady but filled with emotion.
This is where I've always felt I belong. They don't have anyone else besides this place and people like me, the sisters here. I can't change the whole world, but I can make them feel loved. And to me, that's enough.
James felt an unfamiliar warmth rise within him. He had never thought love could be so simple, free of expectation, given without conditions, just a pure act of presence and care. A little while later, Anna knelt to tidy up the books the children had scattered on a nearby table. A boy, around 8 years old with messy black hair, approached hesitantly, his bright eyes shining with shyness.
Auntie Anna, I learned 5 new English words today. I want to read them to you.
Anna looked up, nodding encouragingly.
That's amazing. Let me hear you read them.
The boy took a deep breath, clutching a small book tightly, and carefully sounded out each word. When he stumbled on a tricky one, Anna gently corrected him, her gaze filled with pride. James stood not far away, observing with undivided attention. Anna wasn't just a guide, she was a friend, a pillar of support these children could lean on. Anna invited James to sit at a wooden table nearby, where a group of children were busy coloring. She set a box of chalk pastels in front of him with a playful smile.
Would you like to join us? I think you'd enjoy it.
James raised an eyebrow, slightly taken aback.
Me? I haven't picked up a crayon since I was a child.
Anna shrugged, setting the box down in front of him.
That's okay. No one's here to judge. It's about enjoying the moment.
After a brief pause, James picked up a crayon and started drawing a lopsided circle on the paper. Across from him, Anna focused on coloring her own picture.
Do you spend a lot of time here?
James asked, breaking the silence.
At least twice a week.
Anna replied without looking up.
I come to teach the kids basic things or just to play with them. They don't have families, and I understand what that feels like. No one should ever feel unloved.
James stopped drawing, his gaze lingering on Anna. Her words, though gentle, carried a sadness he couldn't ignore.
Did you feel that way?
He asked, his tone quieter now. Anna hesitated before nodding slightly.
When I was young, I lost my father. My mother carried the weight of our family alone. There were times when I felt like a burden. But this church, this place taught me that sometimes love is what helps you move past the pain.
James felt his throat tighten. He looked down at his unfinished drawing, realizing how disconnected he had been from the idea of connection and compassion for so long.
Maybe I need to learn that from you,
he said softly, his voice full of sincerity. A little later, Anna handed James a pair of gloves and led him to the church's backyard, where the sisters and a few volunteers were preparing meals for the children. When Anna handed James a pair of gloves, he hesitated briefly. His hands, accustomed to holding pens, phones, and documents worth millions, now found themselves gripping a pair of rough rubber gloves. Anna smiled encouragingly, her tone light yet persuasive.
It's not too hard. You just cut the carrots like this, see?
She demonstrated with her small, steady hands, wielding the worn knife effortlessly. James nodded, put on the gloves, and began cutting. At first, his movements were clumsy. Some carrot slices were too thick, others too thin. A 10-year-old boy sitting next to him laughed as he watched.
Mister, that one's not even,
the boy said, giggling. James paused, looking at the uneven slice in his hand before bursting into laughter, a genuine, hearty laugh that surprised even him.
You're right. I guess I'm not very good at this,
he admitted. How long had it been since he laughed like this? Not the polite chuckles at parties, not the formal smiles during deals, but real, unfiltered laughter born from life's simple moments. As James adjusted to the rhythm of the work, the knife in his hand felt less foreign, and he began to find a certain ease in the task. Every now and then he glanced at Anna. She moved gracefully among the children, sometimes kneeling to listen, sometimes smiling as she helped adjust a shoelace or corrected a drawing. Every action was infused with care and dedication, as though she were the heart of this small, vibrant world. James wasn't just watching her. He was seeing a new world he hadn't realized he needed.
Have you been doing this long?
James asked as Anna approached the table with a new bag of vegetables. Anna thought for a moment before answering, her eyes shining with warmth.
More than 5 years, I think. I started coming here when my brother grew older and didn't need me as much.
James studied her intently.
Aren't you tired? Working at the diner is exhausting enough?
Anna laughed softly, setting the bag down.
Of course I get tired. But when I'm here, I don't think about that. I think about what I can do for these kids, for the people who have no one else to rely on.
Her words stopped James in his tracks. He sensed an honesty in her that was rare, and in that moment he understood that Anna didn't live for herself. She lived for those around her, and that made her strong in a way he had never encountered before. When the children's meal was ready, James followed Anna into the small dining room at the back of the church. The kids sat around old wooden tables, chatting and laughing as they ate. The space buzzed with joy and life, something James had long forgotten existed in his pressure-filled world. A little girl tugged at his sleeve.
Mister, do you want to sit with us?
James smiled and sat beside them. A boy handed him a small plate of rice, his eyes lighting up when James accepted it.
Eat, mister? It's really good.
James took a bite and laughed again.
You're right. This is delicious.
From nearby, Anna watched James blending into the space with a look of quiet satisfaction. She stepped closer and said softly,
You're doing great. The kids already like you.
James looked up at her, his eyes softer now.
It's been a long time since I felt this happy. Maybe I needed this more than I thought.
Anna smiled knowingly, her gaze full of understanding.
Everyone needs a place where they feel they belong. Maybe this wasn't your world before, but perhaps it's becoming a part of you now.
As the afternoon wore on, James watched the children play in the churchyard. A boy climbed the oak tree, while others ran around its base, their laughter ringing out like music. James felt as though he'd awakened from a long dream in which he'd believed success and power were the only things that gave life meaning. He turned to Anna, who stood quietly beside him, her eyes fixed on the children with a serene smile.
I think you just taught me a lesson,
he said, his voice low but sincere. Anna glanced at him curiously.
What lesson?
James smiled.
That happiness doesn't come from grand things, but from the little moments I used to overlook.
Anna didn't reply, but her smile deepened, as though she had always known. After the visit to the church, James no longer maintained the invisible distance between himself and Anna. In the days that followed, they began spending more time together, but not through lavish parties or formal gatherings as he was used to. Instead, it was through simple, genuine moments that James had never experienced before, moments that gradually changed his understanding of life's meaning. Morning sunlight shone down on the narrow streets of a working-class neighborhood in Atlanta. James, dressed in a simple coat and casual shoes, stood beside Anna in front of a makeshift wooden table. On the table were paper bags containing food and drinks, all prepared by the volunteer group. James frowned slightly, holding a bag of food but unsure what to do next.
I just hand this to them like this?
He asked, his voice tinged with hesitation. Anna gave a light laugh, her eyes filled with encouragement.
Yes, but remember to look them in the eye and smile. What they need isn't just the food, but also the feeling of being respected.
James nodded and followed Anna's instructions. A homeless man, dressed in tattered clothes, approached. James handed him a bag of food, saying slowly,
Have a good day.
The man looked up at James, his tired eyes revealing a glimmer of gratitude. He nodded slightly and said,
Thank you. God bless you.
James felt an indescribable surge of emotion. He had donated millions to charities before, but he had never directly seen the faces of those he helped. As the man walked away, Anna stepped closer and said softly,
Sometimes, even just a kind word can change someone's entire day.
James looked at Anna, his eyes softening.
You always know how to focus on what matters, Anna.
Later that afternoon, after finishing a long day at the church, James and Anna took a walk through a nearby park. The setting sun cast a golden glow over gravel paths and lush green trees. Anna paused by a large oak tree where a few squirrels scurried about, gathering acorns. She leaned against the tree, watching them with a gentle smile.
Look at them. They don't need much, just a tree and some food, but they seem so happy.
James stood beside her, his eyes following the squirrels, but his thoughts lingered on her words. Slowly he nodded, his voice deep and thoughtful.
Sometimes we don't need much to feel complete. I think I just learned that from you.
Anna turned to him, looking at him for a long moment. For the first time, she saw a completely different James, not the cold, sharp-eyed billionaire, but a man beginning to rediscover the meaning of life through small, simple moments.
I think you're changing,
Anna said softly. James let out a light laugh, his eyes filled with sincerity.
Maybe I'm the one who needs to change, but I'll say this. You're the reason.
Her steps faltered momentarily at his words, but instead of responding, she simply smiled and continued walking. In that shared silence, both of them felt the bond between them growing stronger. Planting flowers in the community garden another day. Anna took James to a community garden she often tended with residents of the neighborhood. Together, they planted small flowers. James's hands fumbled slightly with the tiny seeds, drawing a soft laugh from Anna, who gently guided him.
Don't worry,
she said with a light, teasing tone.
Plants don't need perfection, just love.
James looked at Anna, this time not with curiosity but with deep admiration. A quiet evening on the church steps one evening. After a long day, they sat together on the steps in front of the church. The dim street lights cast a faint glow, and the wind rustled softly through the trees. Anna gazed up at the sky, where a few stars began to twinkle.
When I was a child, I used to look at the stars and wonder if life had anything for me besides hard,
she said, her voice tinged with quiet reflection. James was silent for a moment before asking gently,
And now have you found your answer?
Anna smiled, turning to face him.
I think I found meaning in living for others. What about you?
James didn't respond immediately, but as he looked into Anna's eyes, he realized that the meaning of life he had been searching for all these years might be right in front of him. With each encounter, James and Anna gradually opened up to each other. James, who once believed that money and power were everything, now realized that happiness came from the simplest things: a grateful glance, a sincere word, or a peaceful moment shared with Anna. Anna, who had often shielded herself in a world of responsibilities and sacrifice, began to see that not everyone was like those who had hurt her before. Through small but meaningful actions, James proved that he wasn't just wealthy in material terms, but that he had a heart willing to change. These simple outings didn't just deepen their understanding of each other, they made them an inseparable part of each other's lives. The night sky resembled a velvet curtain, speckled with faint stars in the distance. After a long day helping at the church, James and Anna walked slowly down the narrow path leading to the residential area. The rustling of leaves in the breeze and the earthy scent of damp grass created a peaceful backdrop, yet within them, emotions stirred restlessly. James, a man accustomed to making life-altering decisions, now felt like a novice stepping onto an unfamiliar path. The feelings within him grew clearer, but the words remained lodged in his throat, as if speaking them might shatter the fragile magic between them. Anna pulled her thin coat tighter around herself, her gaze fixed ahead, though her mind seemed lost in its own maze of thoughts. James's presence beside her brought a sense of safety yet also unease. For years she had kept her heart locked away to shield it from pain, and now she found herself grappling with the walls she had built. James slowed his pace, his eyes following Anna's every step. Her image, a woman both strong and gentle, someone who instinctively placed others before herself, had awakened something deep within him. He took a deep breath, as though gathering the courage to break the silence.
Anna, there's something I need to say to you.
Anna stopped, turning to face him. Her eyes held a hint of surprise, but no sign of avoidance.
What is it you want to say?
James met her gaze, eyes he had once thought unapproachable, yet now saw as steadfast, with a glimmer of vulnerability. He knew that the words he was about to speak could not be said lightly. Drawing in another breath, his voice came out deep and steady, though each word carried the weight of a long-hidden truth.
Anna, you didn't just save my life, you saved my heart.
He paused, as though considering whether to go on. But the way Anna looked at him, attentive and gentle, gave him the courage to continue.
You've shown me that life can mean so much more when we connect with others. I used to think I had everything, money, power, and respect. But the truth is, I had nothing but loneliness.
James faltered briefly, as though each word stripped away a layer of his carefully maintained armor. He had never admitted his solitude to anyone, and now, standing before Anna, the final walls he had built were crumbling.
The things I once believed to be important only pushed me further away from people, but you, with your kindness, your quiet strength, and a compassion I've never seen in anyone, have shown me that another kind of life is possible, a life I never dared to imagine.
Anna stood still, letting James's words seep into her soul like quiet waves lapping against the shore. Her eyes lingered on him, the man who had once walked into her diner with an air of cold detachment, now standing before her, stripped of all pretense. His gaze was sincere, unguarded, carrying none of the authority she once thought insurmountable. But Anna couldn't simply live in the present. Memories surged through her like a storm, unkept promises, relationships that left deep scars, and the countless times she told herself that love wasn't meant for someone like her. She remembered the moment she abandoned her dream of becoming a doctor, leaving behind all hopes to shoulder her family's burdens. From that moment, she had built a wall around her heart. Now, that wall was trembling. She lowered her head, trying to steady herself, her hands clenching slightly, as though grasping for control. Anna was used to sacrificing for others, but allowing herself to be loved, to step through her fear, was a challenge she had never dared to face. Sensing her internal struggle, James took a step closer, his voice gentle yet resolute.
Anna, I know you've stood strong on your own for so long. I'm not here to change that. But I want to tell you this. You don't have to face everything alone anymore. You deserve someone to lean on, and I want to be that person.
Those words opened a door Anna had always feared to step through. She looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, not just of pain, but of hope, fragile and unnamed. In that moment, her memories returned with a piercing clarity. She recalled her father walking away, leaving her mother to battle a chronic illness alone. She remembered the first time she realized no one would come to help them, that she would have to step up. She thought of the people she once trusted, a close friend, a fleeting romance, all of whom had left when she needed them most. So she had built herself a fortress. She had told herself that keeping her heart locked away meant she couldn't be hurt, and that focusing solely on helping others would shield her from confronting her own pain. But James, he was something different. Anna took a deep breath, summoning the last reserves of her courage. Her voice trembled slightly, but the words came stronger than she anticipated.
You know, James, I've always believed love wasn't meant for me. That as long as I did my best caring for my mother, my brother, the children at the church, that my life would have meaning.
She paused, her eyes glistening.
But when you walked into my life, you showed me something different. You made me see that sacrifice is important, but living with an open heart is even more so.
James stood silently, his gaze soft, as if to reassure her that she didn't have to continue if she wasn't ready. But Anna knew this moment was hers. For the first time in years, she felt brave enough to step beyond her fear.
You made me realize that opening up isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength. And I think I'm ready to trust again.
James took a deep breath, as if the entire world had paused to hear her words. Slowly, he extended his hand not as a demand, but as a gesture of patience and respect. Anna looked at his hand, then back into his eyes. The hesitation and fear were gone. She placed her hand in his, a quiet affirmation of her readiness.
"Thank you, James,"
she said softly, her voice carrying the strength of someone who had triumphed over her inner fears. James gently squeezed her hand, saying nothing more. In that moment, no words were needed. Under the faint golden glow of the streetlights, they stood together, hands intertwined. Both could feel it in their hearts for the first time in years. They had found where they belonged in each other's eyes and in each other's hearts. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows of Gracie's diner, casting a golden glow over the empty tables. Anna was wiping down the last of them when the bell above the door chimed softly. She turned and froze for a moment. Two women had entered, their presence transforming the humble diner into a stage for something far more significant than a casual visit. Margaret Hamilton, James's mother, led the way. Her elegant yet imposing demeanor filled the room, her silver hair neatly pinned back, and a tailored coat draped over her narrow shoulders. Her gaze swept over the diner with an air of disdain, as if cataloging every imperfection. Behind her, Elizabeth, James's sister, followed. Her sharp heels clicked against the floor in a rhythm as calculated as her movements. With her arms crossed and a smirk that barely hid her contempt, Elizabeth's eyes locked onto Anna like a predator sizing up its prey. Margaret stopped in the middle of the diner, her presence dominating the small space. Her icy blue eyes settled on Anna, scanning her from head to toe.
"This is where you work?"
Margaret asked, her voice laced with faint mockery.
"How quaint."
Elizabeth let out a soft laugh, her red lips curling into a condescending smile.
"I can't imagine what James sees in a place like this,"
Elizabeth said, her tone dripping with derision. Anna set down her cleaning cloth, straightened her apron, and stepped forward. Though her heart tightened, she kept her expression calm and composed.
"Good afternoon,"
Anna said, her voice steady.
"How can I help you?"
Margaret didn't reply immediately. Instead, she took a slow step forward, her heels clicking ominously. Her eyes scanned Anna again, this time with an added layer of judgment that went deeper than just her modest uniform or her surroundings.
"We need to talk,"
Margaret said coldly, her words slicing through the air.
"It's about James."
Anna's grip on the edge of the counter tightened, but she didn't flinch. She held Margaret's gaze, refusing to let the woman's commanding presence intimidate her.
"Go ahead,"
Anna replied simply. Margaret exchanged a glance with Elizabeth, who stepped closer, her smile widening as she began to speak.
"You're an ambitious one, aren't you?"
Elizabeth said, her voice oozing with folk sweetness.
"I mean, it takes some confidence to believe someone like you could fit into James's life."
Anna's chest tightened at the barely veiled insult, but she kept her expression neutral.
"What exactly do you mean by someone like me?"
Anna asked, her tone even. Margaret's lips tightened slightly, but Elizabeth showed no hesitation in responding.
"Oh, come on,"
Elizabeth said, her tone sharper now.
"You know what we mean. Your background, your position. Do you really think someone from your world can survive in ours?"
Anna inhaled deeply, keeping her composure as she faced the blatant condescension. Margaret stepped forward again, her voice softer but no less cutting.
"I'm not here to insult you, Anna,"
she said, though her tone suggested otherwise.
"I'm here to protect James. The world he comes from, our world, is unforgiving. The scrutiny, the judgment, it would crush someone like you. I'm saying this for your own good."
Anna's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away.
"Let me make something clear,"
Anna began, her voice steady and unwavering.
I know exactly who I am. I know where I come from, and I'm proud of it.
Elizabeth scoffed, her arms crossing tighter.
Pride won't get you far, Anna.
She sneered.
You might think you're strong, but reality has a way of reminding people like you of their place.
Anna's eyes flashed, a spark of defiance igniting within her.
You're right,
Anna said, stepping closer.
Reality does have a way of showing people their place. And right now, it's showing me that I don't need your approval to be with James.
Margaret's expression hardened. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a thick white envelope, placing it on the counter between them with a resounding thud.
Take this,
Margaret said, her tone clipped.
It's enough to start a new life somewhere far from here. Consider it a gift.
Anna's eyes fell on the envelope, but she didn't touch it. She knew what it symbolized, not generosity, but dismissal, a price they thought they could pay to erase her. She looked back at Margaret, her voice calm but laced with steel.
You think I'm here for his money?
Anna asked, her voice low but cutting.
You think you can buy me off like I'm some inconvenience to be removed?
Margaret's face remained impassive, but her silence spoke volumes.
I'm not here because of what James has.
Anna continued, her voice rising slightly with conviction.
I'm here because of who he is. And if you think a stack of cash is enough to make me walk away, then you've underestimated me.
Elizabeth laughed, shaking her head as she stepped forward.
This isn't about money, Anna,
Elizabeth said, her voice sharp.
This is about reality. People like you don't belong in our world, and deep down you know it.
Anna turned to Elizabeth, her gaze piercing.
You're right, Elizabeth,
Anna said firmly.
I don't belong in your world, but that doesn't mean I don't belong with James, and if you think you can intimidate me into leaving him, you're wasting your time.
For a moment, silence blanketed the diner, heavy and charged. Margaret and Elizabeth exchanged a glance, their polished masks slipping just enough to reveal their surprise at Anna's defiance. Anna stepped closer to the counter, her eyes locked on Margaret.
Take your money,
Anna said, her voice steady and resolute.
Because there's nothing in that envelope that can buy my love or my integrity.
Margaret's hand trembled ever so slightly as she picked up the envelope. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't speak. The sound of the doorbell broke through the tense atmosphere of the diner. James walked in, his usual confident demeanor intact, but his expression darkened immediately as he took in the scene before him. Margaret stood opposite Anna, her posture exuding authority, while Elizabeth stood beside her, arms crossed and a look of disdain etched across her face. On the table between them sat a thick envelope, an undeniable symbol of what James had always feared, his family's attempt to dismantle the fragile relationship he had just begun. James stopped in the middle of the diner, his eyes scanning the three women before settling on the envelope. A surge of anger rose within him, but he forced himself to remain calm. His voice, deep and steady, carried a clear undertone of disappointment.
I didn't think you and Elizabeth would resort to this, Mother.
Margaret faltered for a brief moment but quickly regained her composure. She turned to face her son, her gaze firm and resolute, though tinged with an almost maternal softness meant to justify her actions.
James, I'm only trying to protect you, she said. This girl, she's not suitable for you. I'm doing this for your own good.
James took a step forward, slow but deliberate, until he was standing between Anna and his family. He didn't need to say much, his stance alone made his position clear. He would not back down. Turning to his mother, his eyes reflected a mixture of deep disappointment and unwavering resolve.
If Anna were here for my money, she would have taken it long ago. But she's not that kind of person.
James glanced at Anna, and the softness in his gaze spoke volumes. It was a silent affirmation of where his heart lay, not just in love, but in every battle they would face together.
She's the only person who's made me feel alive,
James continued, his voice growing stronger.
not just existing.
He turned back to Margaret, his tone now as firm as his stance, each word cutting through the tension like a blade.
If you can't accept her, then I don't need your acceptance either.
This tense moment reminds us that true love is never easy. If you resonate with Anna and James's journey of overcoming prejudice, don't forget to share their story with your loved ones. The air grew heavier with the weight of his declaration. Elizabeth, clearly unsettled by his defiance, took a step forward. Her voice was cold and dripping with disdain.
James, you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. Do you really think someone like her can understand our world? It's complicated, ruthless, and she...
Elizabeth paused, her eyes sweeping over Anna with thinly veiled contempt before continuing.
Doesn't belong in it.
James didn't flinch. He fixed his gaze on Elizabeth, his eyes flashing with restrained anger. His voice, calm and deliberate, cut through her words like a scalpel.
Our world, Elizabeth, is a lonely, cold place. And you know what? I don't need someone who understands it. I need someone who can help me rise above it.
He stepped closer to Elizabeth, his presence commanding, his voice sharper now, each word a rebuttal to her arrogance.
And Anna does that better than anyone I've ever met.
Margaret remained silent, her eyes fixed on James, studying him intently. But when she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of her authority as both a mother and a woman who had seen the world.
Don't you see, James? I'm not doing this out of hatred for Anna. I'm doing this because I know this relationship will destroy you. This world will never accept someone like her, and you know that.
James closed his eyes for a moment, as if centering himself, then reopened them with a resolve stronger than ever.
You're wrong, Mother,
he said, his voice steady.
What destroys relationships are the prejudices you carry, the ones our family clings to. Anna hasn't hurt me. She's the reason I want to be a better man.
Margaret hesitated at his words, a flicker of doubt passing through her usually stoic demeanor. But her gaze remained firm, unwilling to concede. Anna, who had remained silent to let James handle the confrontation, finally stepped forward. She placed a gentle hand on James's arm, a silent gesture of gratitude. Then, turning to Margaret and Elizabeth, her expression hardened not with anger, but with an unshakable strength.
I don't need your approval,
Anna said, her voice steady and clear.
And I don't expect it. But what I won't do is walk away from James because of your prejudices. I'm not ashamed of who I am, and I'm not afraid of whatever your world might throw at me.
James turned to Anna, admiration filling his eyes. Standing together, they faced Margaret and Elizabeth as one unyielding in their resolve. The diner was silent for a few seconds, the air thick with tension. Margaret finally broke the stillness, drawing in a deep breath. Her expression softened slightly, but her tone remained firm.
You've made up your mind, haven't you, James?
James nodded without hesitation.
Yes, Mother. This is my decision, and I don't regret it.
That afternoon, James's family mansion was filled with light and the murmur of lively conversations. It was the annual charity event organized to raise funds for community programs, but Anna felt completely out of place. Every step she took across the grand hall was met with scrutinizing gazes from guests clad in elegant evening wear. Polite yet distant greetings, faint smiles that barely concealed judgmental curiosity, everything weighed on Anna, immersing her in a sea of conflicting emotions. James stayed by her side, his hand resting gently on her back as a reassurance. But Anna knew this event wasn't just a test for her, it was also an opportunity for James's family to find more reasons to oppose their relationship. The event was proceeding smoothly until a sharp scream cut through the air near the dining area.
Mommy, I can't breathe.
All heads turned toward a boy about 10 years old, James's nephew, Elizabeth's son. His face was flushed red, his hands clutching his throat, his body trembling uncontrollably. Elizabeth rushed to her son, her voice filled with panic.
Oh God, someone do something. He's having a severe allergic reaction.
The room erupted into chaos. A few guests stood up, fumbling for what to do. Elizabeth turned frantically to her mother, her voice trembling.
Adrenaline. He needs adrenaline, but I didn't bring it. Someone call an ambulance.
The piercing scream shattered the elegant atmosphere of the charity event. All eyes focused on the dining area, where Elizabeth's son was slumped in his chair. He struggled to breathe, each gasp a painful rasp that failed to bring in air. His flushed face turned pale within seconds. Elizabeth clung to her son in absolute panic.
Oh God, help me! He's having a severe allergic reaction. He can't breathe.
Her voice cracked with fear. The room froze. The guests, powerful and wealthy as they were, could only stand still, exchanging helpless glances. The previously vibrant air grew stifling, filled with the boy's gasping breaths and Elizabeth's desperate sobs. Margaret rushed forward, her trembling hands gripping Elizabeth's shoulders.
Stay calm. We'll call an ambulance. Don't panic.
But even as she tried to maintain composure, her voice betrayed her fear. Nearby, Anna observed the scene with sharp focus, not fear or confusion, but the calm intensity of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done. She quickly stepped forward, kneeling beside the boy, her voice ringing out firm and commanding.
Everyone step back. I need space.
Elizabeth looked up, her eyes filled with both terror and doubt.
What are you doing? You're not a doctor.
Anna ignored the protest. Her eyes scanned the boy, quickly assessing his condition: raised welts on his skin, a heaving chest struggling to pull in air, lips beginning to turn blue.
He's in anaphylactic shock. If we don't act now, he'll stop breathing.
Turning to those standing nearby, Anna issued an urgent command.
Someone bring me a first aid kit now.
A waiter dashed over with a medical kit. Anna swiftly opened it, her hand steady and unflinching as she searched for an adrenaline injector. She checked the dosage, then administered the injection into the boy's thigh with a swift, decisive motion. Pulling the needle out, she gently held the boy's hand, her eyes meeting his as she spoke with a calm yet authoritative tone.
Take a deep breath, sweetheart. I know this is hard, but you're going to be okay. Just listen to me.
Elizabeth held her breath. Margaret froze, and James stood nearby, his eyes filled with tense worry. The room seemed to hold its breath with them, as though time itself had paused in those critical seconds. For a moment, nothing happened. The boy continued gasping, the wheezing sound in his throat loud in the room's silence. Elizabeth sobbed, clutching her son tightly as though afraid he might slip away. Then, slowly, his breathing began to stabilize. His chest rose and fell in a more even rhythm, and the bright red flush on his face faded to a pale but healthier color. Elizabeth broke into uncontrollable sobs, holding her son tightly and murmuring,
Thank God! Thank God!
Anna exhaled deeply, leaning back slightly, but keeping her hand gently on the boy's shoulder, as if to reassure herself he was truly out of danger. She looked up at Elizabeth, her voice soft but firm.
He'll be okay, but make sure to have him checked thoroughly at the hospital. These reactions can recur.
Margaret stood silently in the corner of the room, her eyes fixed on Anna, unable to look away. She saw the young woman who had just saved her grandson's life. Anna's actions had been swift, calm, and decisive, a poise not even many trained professionals might have maintained in such a moment. Margaret recalled every word, every disdainful glance she had given Anna before. In her mind, Anna had been just another person who didn't belong in their world, an opportunist, someone unworthy. But now, the image of Anna kneeling beside her grandson, her sharp focus and gentle demeanor, forced Margaret to confront her own misjudgment. In Margaret's heart, the walls of prejudice, thick and unyielding, began to crack, chipped away by Anna's courage and integrity. When Anna stepped out of the rest area, Margaret was waiting. Her usual cold expression was replaced by a blend of warmth and hesitation. Her hands were clasped tightly together, as if trying to steady herself, an emotion Margaret rarely allowed to surface. She stepped closer to Anna, her voice low but sincere.
"You saved my grandson. Thank you."
Anna blinked in surprise. For the first time, she saw gratitude from Margaret, the woman who had always looked down on her. Anna didn't say much, only nodded gently, her expression calm. Margaret took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on Anna's face. She seemed to struggle for a moment before finding the right words.
"I was wrong about you."
Anna raised an eyebrow slightly but didn't interrupt. Margaret continued, her voice catching slightly, as though admitting her mistake was a battle in itself.
"I thought you didn't belong in this family, but today I realized you're the only one here who had the courage to do the right thing, even when it didn't benefit you."
Margaret paused, her eyes shining with unspoken emotion.
"You didn't just save my grandson, you've changed James in ways I never thought possible, and for that, I owe you an apology."
Anna met Margaret's gaze, her own softening slightly but still resolute. After a brief silence, Anna spoke, her voice steady and both humble and strong.
"I didn't do it for your approval or anyone else's. I did it because it was the right thing to do. If you feel an apology is necessary, I'll accept it. But I hope you're saying it for yourself, not for me."
Margaret hesitated, clearly moved by Anna's words. The strength in Anna's voice wasn't defiance, it was the conviction of someone who knew her worth and refused to let others define it. Margaret nodded slowly, a flicker of genuine emotion in her eyes.
"That's what makes you special. And maybe I was wrong to think you weren't worthy. James was right to believe in you."
Anna gave a small smile, not one of triumph, but of understanding. As Margaret returned to the dining hall, she occasionally glanced toward Anna, watching how effortlessly she blended into the space, not seeking attention but naturally radiating grace. The way Anna carried herself, humble yet full of dignity, left Margaret in quiet reflection. For the first time, Margaret felt an unfamiliar sense of relief. The prejudices that had weighed heavily on her for years didn't disappear overnight, but they had begun to crumble. She realized that sometimes differences don't divide, they can be the very thing that makes a family whole. The room gradually returned to a state of calm, but no one inside it remained the same. Margaret quietly stepped away from her corner, casting one last look at Anna and James, not with doubt or judgment, but with a glimmer of acceptance. She said nothing further, but that small gesture, to James and Anna, carried the weight of a significant shift. James gave Anna's hand a gentle squeeze, his voice a soft whisper in her ear.
"She's changing, you know. My mother has never looked at anyone like that before."
Anna nodded slightly, her eyes still following Margaret's retreating figure.
"Sometimes kindness doesn't need to wait for recognition. I didn't do this to gain anything. But maybe, for the first time, she truly sees me. Not my skin color, not my background, just me."
James looked at her, his eyes filled with admiration and love.
"And I'm so proud of you, of everything you are."
Those words, simple as they were, felt like a final affirmation to Anna that their love had weathered a difficult trial. From a distance, Elizabeth quietly approached Margaret, her voice low.
"Mom, what do you think of her?"
Margaret didn't answer immediately. Her gaze lingered on Anna once more before she spoke, her tone low but laced with newfound respect.
"She's different, but perhaps that's exactly what our family needs. Maybe James was right. She can do what we never could."
That evening didn't end with hugs or congratulatory words, but with a quiet shift within each person's heart. James and Anna left the mansion hand in hand, walking under a sky full of stars. They didn't speak further, but both knew that what they had just endured was only a chapter in the journey ahead, a journey they were ready to face together, because they had proven their love was strong enough to overcome any obstacle. And somewhere deep within Anna's heart, a greater hope began to spark that one day. Not just Margaret, not just James's family, but a world full of prejudice might also change. They walked on, ready for the next chapter of their lives, where love and kindness would continue to light their way forward. Time passed, and the challenges that Anna and James once faced had now become the foundation for a new chapter in their lives. One late evening at the modest clinic they co-managed, Anna sat quietly, her thoughts focused on a notebook in front of her. The pages were filled with notes about medications and treatments she had jotted down from reading old medical books. James walked in, carrying 2 cups of hot tea. He placed one in front of Anna, his gaze full of concern as he noticed her deep in thought for too long.
"Thinking about going back to school again?"
he asked, his voice calm yet encouraging. Anna looked up, a faint smile crossing her face before quickly fading.
"I once dreamed of becoming a doctor, but that feels like a lifetime ago. Now, does it even matter anymore when I've let that chance pass me by?"
James sat across from her, his expression sincere and steadfast.
"Anna, everything you've done for the community, for the kids at the church, for the patients here, proves that dream is still alive inside you. It never truly died. If you don't pursue this, you'll always wonder, what if?"
James's words felt like a gentle push, rekindling a sense of determination in Anna that had long been buried beneath responsibilities and fear. She nodded, a glimmer of hope lighting up within her for the first time in years.
"Maybe it's time I try. Not just for myself, but for the people I want to help."
On her first day at medical school, anxiety surged as Anna realized she was one of the oldest students in the class. Younger students quickly formed their groups, leaving Anna feeling out of place in the lively atmosphere. During a group discussion, Anna shared her perspective, only for a younger student to shrug dismissively and smirk.
"I don't think you need to try so hard. At your age, you're probably not worried about competing with us."
Anna took a deep breath, swallowing the sting of those words. Instead of responding, she chose to let her actions speak. Through every exam, every lab session, she worked harder than anyone in the class. When a professor asked her why she returned to school, Anna replied without hesitation,
"Because I can't ignore the chance to heal those who need me, no matter my age or circumstances."
Over time, her determination and patience began to change how her classmates and professors viewed her. One day, the same student who had mocked her quietly approached her and said,
"You've made me realize how wrong I was. Your determination is inspiring."
But the challenges weren't confined to the classroom. Anna had to juggle her studies with her responsibilities at home. There were nights when she stayed up until dawn studying, only to wake up early to care for her mother and younger brother. One evening, as Anna nearly collapsed from exhaustion, James found her slumped over the kitchen table, her head resting on an open book. He gently shook her awake, his voice a mix of concern and mild reproach.
"You can't keep pushing yourself like this. Let me help you, Anna."
Anna looked at him, her eyes red from lack of sleep, but her voice steady.
"James, I can't give up. I've come this far, not just for myself, but for everyone who believes in me. And for you, thank you for never stopping believing in me."
James didn't argue further. He nodded silently and wrapped his arms around her. He knew his love was the anchor that kept her moving forward. On the day Anna received her diploma, the auditorium erupted in applause. Yet amid the cheering, Anna's eyes sought only one person, James, seated in the front row with a proud smile and eyes full of warmth. Margaret and Elizabeth were also there, quietly observing. For the first time, they witnessed Anna in a moment that symbolized her transformation not as a waitress from a small diner, but as a doctor, a strong and accomplished woman who had overcome every obstacle. As Anna stepped forward to accept her diploma, Margaret leaned toward Elizabeth and whispered,
"She's not just extraordinary. She's the best thing that's ever happened to James."
Elizabeth glanced at her mother, surprised. It was the first time she had heard Margaret speak about Anna with such admiration. When Anna descended from the stage, James met her at the bottom, holding a bouquet of pure white roses. His smile was warm, and his eyes glistened with pride.
"Congratulations, Dr. Anna,"
he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Anna smiled through her tears, her voice trembling with happiness and gratitude.
"I couldn't have done it without you. This isn't just my success, it's..."
James smiled back but didn't reply immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath, his gaze bright with determination. He stepped back slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. Then, to Anna's shock, James knelt on one knee amidst the bustling crowd. A murmur spread through the audience, but James paid no attention to anyone but Anna.
"Anna, you've made me see life in a way I never thought possible. You didn't just save my life, you saved my heart. You've shown me that true love makes us stronger, not weaker."
James pulled out a ring with a sparkling diamond, his hand steady even as his voice trembled slightly.
"Now that you've achieved your dream, I have only one dream left, to share every moment of life with you."
Anna raised her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, every challenge, every prejudice, every trial they had faced together seemed like distant memories. James looked up at her, his eyes filled with hope.
"Anya, will you marry me?"
Anna knelt down, placing a hand on James's shoulder. Her voice was choked with emotion but clear.
"James, I have learned to be strong for others, but you've taught me that I deserve love too. Yes, I'll marry you."
The room erupted in applause and cheers, but for Anna and James, time seemed to stand still. James stood, gently sliding the ring onto her finger before pulling her into a tight embrace, as though he feared the dream might vanish if he let go. Margaret, seated in the front row, wiped away a tear. Though she said nothing, her gaze spoke volumes to Elizabeth, who looked at her mother with newfound understanding.
"James has found the one who truly completes him,"
Margaret's eyes seemed to say. As Anna and James walked out of the auditorium together, hand in hand, the golden light of the afternoon sun bathed everything in warmth. James turned to Anna, his smile radiant with joy.
"So it looks like we're about to start a new journey together."
Anna smiled back, her eyes sparkling with hope.
"And this time, we'll face it side by side."
The wedding took place in the small church where Anna had spent years helping homeless children. It wasn't a lavish affair, but a simple, heartfelt ceremony brimming with love and warmth. The children at the church handcrafted vibrant paper flowers, hanging them along the rows of old wooden pews. Others ran around the small garden, laughing with joy, holding white balloons, a symbol of hope. The guests weren't celebrities or people of influence, but those who had shared Anna and James's journey. In one corner sat truck drivers who used to frequent Gracie's diner, in another, homeless individuals who had received Anna and James's help. Everyone wore modest yet tidy attire, their eyes sparkling with happiness for the couple. Margaret sat in the front row beside Elizabeth. Her gaze no longer carried judgment but quiet emotion. Elizabeth, who had once strongly opposed the relationship, now smiled faintly, as if finally accepting that this love was truly meant to be. The church doors slowly opened, and Anna appeared. She wore a simple white wedding dress, lovingly handcrafted by the women in the community. Delicate lace trim highlighted her slender frame, accentuating her natural and unpretentious beauty. The children in the church scattered flower petals along her path. One little girl turned back, giggling as she whispered,
"Miss Amy looks like an angel."
James stood at the end of the aisle, his eyes fixed on Anna, never wavering for a moment. In that instant, it felt as if the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. As Anna approached, James leaned in and whispered,
"You're more beautiful than I ever imagined."
Anna smiled, her eyes glistening with tears.
"And you're the reason I have this moment today."
When the priest invited them to exchange their vows, the church fell silent, as if everyone were holding their breath. James took a deep breath, his gaze steady on Anna. His voice was warm, every word ringing with sincerity.
"Anna, you didn't just save my life. You saved my soul. Before I met you, I thought love was a luxury, something not meant for someone like me. But you changed everything. You taught me that love is the greatest strength. Today I stand here to promise that I will love you, protect you, and build a life full of hope with you."
Anna looked at James, her eyes reflecting the deep emotions within her. Her voice trembled slightly but was clear and strong with every word.
"James, you are not just the person I love, but the one who helped me believe in myself. You were there when I doubted myself, when I was too afraid to hope. You're not just my partner. You've given me a family, a home in your heart. I promise to love you, trust you, and face every challenge in life with you."
When they exchanged rings, the entire church erupted in applause, cheers from the children, and tears of joy from everyone present. As the ceremony ended, Anna and James stepped out of the church into the radiant sunlight. Margaret approached Anna, and for the first time she extended her hand. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears.
"Miss Anna, I once thought you would make James lose himself, but now I realize you've done the opposite. You've helped him find himself. Thank you for not giving up."
Elizabeth stood nearby and stepped forward with a warm smile.
"Anna, if anyone had told me your love for James would change this family, I wouldn't have believed them. But now, I think you're exactly what this family always needed."
Anna, overwhelmed with emotion, nodded gently, her eyes filled with gratitude.
"Thank you, not just for accepting me, but for giving me the chance to prove that love can truly change everything."
The reception was held in the small garden behind the church, where strings of twinkling lights hung between the trees. Children played with balloons, while guests gathered around tables to enjoy food prepared by Anna's former co-workers from Gracie's diner. A small child shyly tugged on James's sleeve, pointing to Anna, who was speaking with Margaret.
"Uncle James, will Miss Anna always stay with us?"
James crouched down, smiling warmly.
"She's not just staying with all of you. She's part of my family now too."
On a small stage set up in the middle of the garden, James took the microphone. His voice resonated across the quiet evening.
"Thank you all for being here today. I can't imagine my life without Anna, the woman who has completely transformed how I see the world. Our love is not just the story of two people, but proof of the power of kindness, faith, and hope."
Anna stood beside him, her eyes shimmering as James turned to her to finish his speech.
"Anna, you're not just my wife. You're the reason I believe we can build a better world together."
The garden filled with applause. White balloons were released into the sky, carrying the blessings of everyone present for the newlyweds. Under the twinkling lights and a sky full of stars, Anna and James danced together, surrounded by love, laughter, and hope, a perfect beginning to their new journey as husband and wife. The complete happiness of Anna and James is a testament that kindness and love can transform everything. If this story has touched your heart, feel free to share this inspiring tale of the power of compassion. Anna and James walked side by side, hand in hand, under a night sky sparkling with stars. Their love was not just a connection between two people, but a guiding light for anyone who had ever doubted that kindness and love could change everything. It was a perfect ending, but also the beginning of a new journey filled with hope and purpose.